Good evening. On behalf of HR Speaks, I, Khushi Ashar, the president of this prestigious club, would like to welcome you today. HR Speaks is hosting this unique webinar on podcast scripting with the support of our inspirational principal, Dr. Pooja Ramchandani. Our team would also like to thank the teacher in charge, Ms. Shweta Singh, for her guidance has helped make today's event possible. We are very excited to announce our new initiative, the Writers Community, where you will receive exclusive updates about the themes of the magazine and the writer sessions hosted by HR Speaks. To join the community, please fill out the link in the chat box. We would like to welcome Ms. Lakshmi Krishnan, our host for today's webinar. Thank you for being here. Handing it over to Shweta ma'am.
Thank you, Kushi. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the podcast scripting session. Welcome to our guest, Ms. Lakshmi, and I welcome our principal in charge, Dr. Pooja Ramchandani. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining in for the session. Quick introduction. I'm really honored to introduce ma'am. Ma'am has been associated with the college as a faculty in the Department of Commerce and have actively worked towards the growth and development of the college by working in more than 20 years now. She's the head of Department of Commerce and is also the member of Board of Studies in Business Management. Ma'am has taught various management, marketing, and research subjects. She's a recognized guide for doctors in philosophy in the subject of commerce from the University of Mumbai. Her motto in life is to create responsible student leaders who bring the positive change in the society. She's a firm believer that there is no alternative to hard work for achieving success and excellence. She's also the Dean of Commerce she's also the Dean of Commerce and Management in the HSNC University. Thank you so much, ma'am. We welcome you for the session. Would you like to speak few words, ma'am?
Thank you, dear, for such a long description of mine. I'm sure Lakshmi will kill me for this, but she looks like a student. A warm welcome to you, dear Lakshmi, to join us in HR College virtually. We would have been blessed if you would have come offline and in our college on the premises and had met all the bubbly students of HR Speaks along with their mentor, Shweta. HR Speaks is a community of HR college which have taken responsibility on their shoulder to ensure that the literary part of or the literature part of our life, which is getting somewhere lost, they bring back to our students. They also run a magazine where they look at how you can bring about your own voice or your opinion. And you please also would say, please follow their Instagram account. They are so smart that they can bring in a whole lot of good events that on their, they also have a literary festival, which being a commerce college will say, what is commerce supposed to do with a literature fest? But HR Speaks take up the responsibility, and I always call my students my brand ambassadors. These are the opportunities that we open up for our students. And HR Speak has now begun with a new initiative, which is a writers community. When some days back, Shweta called me and said they want to start this initiative. And I said, HR college में कौन लिखेगा? अभी आजकल बच्चे सब Google पे सब करते हैं. But she said students are keen to learn tricks and trade of writing. And that's where the writing aspect of HR Speaks have come out. And they are beginning with this session of yours. And Lakshmi, I'm so grateful that you have joined us as our first speaker who's going to teach them about podcasting. I mean, something that I was thinking, how do these students get these ideas? And I must salute these brand ambassadors sitting at their homes. Despite COVID, they have not visited HR college, I must tell you. Officially, they are all at home. So for them, their HR college is this screen where they have taken every opportunity of inviting any aspect of what they'll want to learn from HR. And I don't know, how do they find you all? These are all secrets that they never share with me, but they find out somehow great speakers. It could be even on mental awareness that they have taken sessions. How do they get information? I mean, hats off to my brand ambassadors and their faculty mentor. So from my side, a warm welcome and a special appreciation for my brand ambassadors who are taking up these initiatives and have been making not just me proud, but the entire college proud. So even if city is shut, colleges are shut, HR college has never seen a day off. So we have been working 24/7. And I thank you, Lakshmi, for joining us here. And I think it's a great, great, great moment that you are joined us here and will be teaching them how do you do a podcasting session. So looking forward, and over to you, Shweta.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your wonderful, encouraging words. It really means a lot to us. So I would over to Kavya for the speaker introduction.
Yes, thank you so much, ma'am. It gives me immense pleasure to introduce our guest for today's session, Miss Lakshmi Krishnan. A woman who wears many hats, she is famously known for the Blind Book Date. She is also a renowned podcaster with IBM, where she hosts the podcast on literature called Litnama. This streams globally. The list does not end here. She's a media and communications professor, a content creator, a writer, cultural researcher, and the publisher of the newsletter The Culture Capital. Having completed her post-graduation from SNDT in English, Ms. Lakshmi was also awarded Student of the Year award in the year 2018-2019. She has also bagged the Winning Team Leader award from the Young India Challenge. Welcome, ma'am. It's an honor to have you on board with us today. For all the audience members, please do drop in your questions in the chat box. Ma'am, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much. I hope all of you can hear me. There is no successful webinar that ever happens without a technical glitch, and that has sort of happened on my end. We've lost power in my area, so we'll just wait it out. First of all, thank you so much, Pooja ma'am. It's an honor to be here. Actually, my introduction to HR after being a student has also been that I've been a visiting faculty in the Department of BMM. So I also came to HR virtually as a professor last year, in the last semester. And it's been such a vibrant community, and they were absolutely welcoming. We did a podcast together and it was phenomenal. So of course I had to say yes workshop. And I've heard a lot about Shweta ma'am as well, and how she motivates all these students to do so much. And that is so exciting because I feel so when I was a student, I used to love extracurricular activities. Like you would find me outside of college more than in college. So I understand what a colossal loss it is to you as a person when everything is shut down. I feel college fests have played a huge role in making me who I am today. And HR has been one of the most reputed ones from that. Getting a trophy at HR meant everything to students of Mumbai. And I'm so glad you kept up the legacy online. So thank you, ma'am. Thank you to both of you on the starters. Uh, I know I have 1 hour to try to sum up everything I know about podcasting in like limited frames and limited time. So I will try to do as much justice as I can. If you have any questions, I am always up for follow-up conversations, and you can constantly put them in the chat as well. I'm just going to quickly share my screen so I can show you my presentation. At any point, if I glitch or my screen glitches, please do let me know. Yeah, I'm on a very, very lethal combination of Vodafone, mobile internet on a hotspot. So I think I'm challenging all odds here. But yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, Ms. Lakshmi, just a suggestion. If you want to switch off your video, maybe you'll be able to, run the session, without any interruption. The audio would be better, I guess. So if it's possible. Since you have an issue.
I think that's best, right? we can get honest experience right here. Listening to someone talk about podcasts, like sort of without the video. I'll try to go as long as I can with the video. At any point, if I glitch, and just give me a prompt and I'll just switch off my video. Perfect. So podcast, I know the word is very heavy. I know the concept is new to some of you, is something that you feel like has been around for years, right? Do you remember the times when our parents used to tell us that they would hear their daily news on radio, right? Or they used to tell you that whenever there used to be a cricket match, all of them would sit down and tune into one particular transistor, and that would tell them everything about what's happening. Not, right? So in this conversation, I'm going to try and break down podcasting to very, very simple units, something that I think all of us can take away from. And I would love to see all of you start a podcast of your own, if that's a possibility by the end of this conversation. So this presentation is largely shaped from things that I learned when I stopped doing my podcast. So I completed a season 1 of Litnama, and I was working in full swing on another podcast, which was backed by YouTube Space. We were shooting in the Google headquarters in Mumbai. It was phenomenal. Everything was great until the pandemic happened. So we had to shut shop. We couldn't record any further, and we just had to pack up the show right there. We tried on Zoom, but we just didn't feel comfortable, right? Because some conversations don't really sound familiar on Zoom. We kept it on hold. It's a hopeful project that we plan on restarting after the pandemic. But there are a few things that I learned from when I stopped it, right? Because usually when you're a part of the process, you don't see, say, certain red flags or certain things that you couldn't have noticed when you were so closely involved. For me, taking a step back has been the best decision I've ever made, because what I'm working for on season 2 is something that I never dreamt of doing in the first place. So why me? Why listen to me? What do I have to share with you? Right? So I spearheaded 2 very interesting podcast related projects, right? So when I say podcast, are there some podcasts that you all listen to? Any names that come to your mind? Can you just drop them in the chat? Any podcast that you've ever heard? I see some names. Joe Rogan, Impact Theory. Okay, we have pros in the room. Ranveer Show, Voice with Variku. Right. Now, these shows are more centric shows, right? There are influential people who lead these conversations to you. Now, you might think that, oh, I'm a student. What am I going to do, right? Where do I come in? How can I start a podcast, and where do I get the credibility from? Let me tell you, when I started Litnama, I was in the first year of my post-graduation. I had an idea of what I wanted to do. I had a goal of what I wanted to achieve. And I started pitching to different networks that, let's see who might pick up my podcast. And it happened. So I was still a student when I was doing a podcast. And if you know anything about the IVM network, then we have experts like Cyrus Brocha, we have Natasha Rathor, we have Varun Dugirala, who runs Advertising is Dead. We have all these big guns. We have Amit Verma, who run like 3-hour long shows, right? Where do I fit in? And initially I felt very lost, right? A college student, what does she have to add to the conversation? But I learned so much, and I feel like I'm going to try and give that away to you today. The second show that I did was in Marathi. So the first one that I did was in English. It was an audio show. It was roughly, I was hosting it and I had 2 guests, and these guests would come and talk to me. The second was between 2 people. So I had a co-host, that's Tripti Khamkar, and we did the show in Marathi. And this was a video show, right? I'm very comfortable on audio because, I could be sitting chill and like wearing a sweatshirt into the studio and it wouldn't matter, right? But in a video, there are so many things that you need to take care of, right? For example, there's a multi-camera setup, right? How do you look at what camera at what time is a calculated effort. So I have a fair experience of both audio and video podcasts. Mind you, when podcast initially started, they were only supposed to be audio, right? But then, you had AIB, EIC, SNG, all of your comedy collectors in India that sat down and made it into a video thing, right? I think most of us have seen that conversation with Shah Rukh Khan, where they break down film, right? Formats were experimented a lot in India. But what does it mean to essentially go back to the roots of the podcast? If you look carefully, I have described both my shows in very, very specific ways, right? And why does that specific way matter? Okay, lights here. That's great. Why does that specific way matter, right? So at Nama, I had no experience of an audio room, Okay. I did not know what a studio looks like. I had no idea what goes on the back end. I used to think, oh, podcast is so much fun. You just find another cool person to talk to. Okay. And you sit in a room and you just talk. One of the scariest things that I have experienced being in a podcast room is wearing those headphones on your head and speaking into the mic and listening to your own voice as you speak, right? And you know what's the worst thing in podcasting? The silence. The deafening silence in the room where you are supposed to lead a conversation, right? It's daunting. I think in the first conversation, I took a while to just like look around the room, familiarize myself. Where am I sitting? What am I doing? So Litnama was a very interesting experience. I got to talk to so many of my mentors. So we've had a whole range of guests on the show. We had Ritviz, your artist, like music artist. We've had Radhika Vaz, we've had Natasha Rathor, we've had Trupti Kamkar, we've had authors from Penguin India, from HarperCollins, we've had Vice President of Godrej Industries, a whole range of people. And I will break down the flow of my show as well and tell you how did I go through the process through our conversation. Mulki Shikli Pragati Zari, as the other show that's on the right of the screen, was different. Why was it? It was simply a show that was based on sitting and having a conversation with a friend, right? Trupti is 39. When we started recording, I was 21 and 21, 22. And there was a whole decade of a difference between the two of us. What this show came from is what has changed in a decade. The kind of experiences that Trupti went through when she was my age versus what experiences I'm going through when I am my age are completely different. What this show tried to do is simplify these concepts, right? So we had a 20-minute fixed timing. The episodes was only 20 minutes long. At the same time, the hosts were fixed. It was just me and her episode by episode. And it was in Marathi and it was a video podcast on YouTube, right? When I look at all of this, we need to first understand ये podcast क्या है, right? As podcast is defined, the dictionary definition of it says it's a spoken word digital medium, basically are audio files on the internet that you can download on your devices and are also received by subscribers automatically. Why have I put it down one after the other, stacked it up? Is because all of these complicate the meaning of podcast so much, right? You start with spoken word, something that's spoken. You have digital, something that happens exclusively online. You have audio files, right? So usually podcasts were just audio files that you find on your Spotify, your Savan, your Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and all of these places. These are available on the internet exclusively. You need to tune in. You need to log on to a platform to listen to a podcast. And then you can get those on your devices. Just like you play a song, right? You go on Spotify right now, you play a song, and what happens is that song plays on your device. A podcast works in a similar manner, right? And if you subscribe to a podcast, then you automatically receive content. Every time the particular show puts up a new episode, you receive content onto your device. You receive a notification that a new episode is out. And this happens automatically. So one of my biggest experiences while I did Litnama, and I'd like to share something more here beyond my screen, is understanding how this flow works, right? Just this entire flow of going from an idea to content, right? The first thing I did when I decided that I want to start a podcast, and this is my entire conversation is going to be from personal experience because it reaches a lot more than me telling you that, oh, you know what, Serial is my favorite podcast, and you know this is how Serial did it, or me telling you that, this is how the Ranveer show works, and this is what Ranveer does. Of course, I don't know what's Ranveer's process, right? But I can give you a comparison. When we started the Ranveer show, I think we're all talking about Ranveer Alabadia here, right? Yeah. When he started the Ranveer show, he was already an established name in the industry, right? He had a thriving YouTube career. He was doing a startup. He was doing all of these cool things. When I started in the industry, my biggest thing was fear. I was not confident at all. Okay. I was like, you know what? There's this network called IVM Network, which does most of the successful podcasts in the country right now. This was roughly 2019. And you know what? I was thinking that maybe I should pitch a show to them. But what do I have to say? Right? What am I going to say that is something new, that is something that's not said, and that is something that they would probably choose to place next to a Cyrus Brocha or a Ranveer, right? I'm just a college student. I don't know. I don't have a successful startup, or I don't have like even 10 followers on my social media to tell them swipe to listen to my podcast. How do I then make something happen? And it's absolutely daunting as an idea. One of the first lessons I learned in podcasting is that podcasting is for everybody. You, me, everyone, we can all do a podcast because that is what the medium says. As long as you have a voice, as long as you have something to say, you can definitely go ahead and start a podcast. Okay. One of other things that happened while I was doing Litnama, and which I feel was one of my biggest wins, was getting artists, right? Because, okay, chalo, I wrote a pitch, okay, I wrote a nice pitch. I sent it to IBM. I sent it to IBM in May 2019. I remember because it was my father's birthday, and in the afternoon, I sent across the pitch. September 2019, I get a random call saying, "Hi, is this Lakshmi? We are calling from IBM. We have a pitch. Would you want to come down for a conversation?" What is the best things that worked out for me, right? And I'm very shrewd when it comes to this. I realized IBM did not have a literature show. IBM had two media related shows. They had like 4 to 5 thing related shows. They had a lot of these personal conversations, but there was no literature. There was one show. Am I lagging for you? No, right? Okay. There was one show which was called Paperback, which was a non-fiction podcast where people would just come and read from a book, right? Some interesting paragraphs, some pages that they like. But where is the conversation, right? Now, who was I while I was entering this room at IBM? I was a student who was interested in literature and not textbooks. I mean, I did not like reading Jane Austen when I was in college. And this is contrary to every literature student ever, because we are asked to read things. I have a feeling I'm stuck with most of you. Can you all hear me? I think now you can, right? So I was walking into this room and I had no idea how to pitch myself. I had no idea what I'm going to say and how I'm going to say it. I answered 3 simple questions. Why me? And how am I going to say it? Why me? I'm a literature student in a class full of people who love Jane Austen, love Shakespeare, love traditional literature. And here I am sitting and thinking about, you know what, if you closely listen to Darde Disco, it actually sounds like a great story, right? It's true. I'm not lying, right? Go back and listen to Darde Disco. You will realize he's telling his entire journey. He's telling his pain. What is that if not Shakespearean, right? He's telling you, for example, that entire song called Dastane Om Shanti Om. That's a full story, right? Beginning, middle, end, what happens to the villain, what happens to the hero. And I'm like, that is literature, right? That was my one thing that set me apart from everybody else, right? So I went to them and I was like, listen, boss, there are literature shows globally. There's not a lot happening in Indian literature. And I don't want to talk to just authors and books. I want to talk to creators across different fields and understand what role has literature played for them. And they said, okay, we are ready to pilot your idea. You sound crazy. Okay. This makes no sense. Somebody who loves listening to a literature podcast will not pay any attention to you. I said, okay, fine. But what if I bring guests? I said, okay, fine. If you can bring people, we are happy to host you. One more thing, podcasting doesn't pay money unless you're doing like a branded deal. So here, starter deal, right? The 50% that the network provided me was that they're going to give me their studio to record, which was in a prime location in Bandra, and they're going to do the post-production of content for me. Everything that was from scripting, from getting guests, from managing their schedules was my 50%. Also because I was a complete newbie in this space, right? This was my deal, and I took it. I was like, chalo fine. Let's try. Created an email template, explained to them who am I, what am I trying to do, and where I want to go from this. And trust me, I got some of the best guests to come and sign up. And I got them to the studio. I made them like come down to Mumbai, talk to me if they were not based out of Mumbai. I know that a lot of people remember me as that one girl who brought Ritviz to our IVM network because Ritviz had never done a podcast before we had a conversation. And it wasn't easy, but what worked is ambition. You can always try. Nobody's going to insult you for like asking for things, right? Of course, unless you're being like super rude and asking them like as if you're entitled to it, there's never going to be a problem. When I was like working for this talk and I was looking at what do I say to all of you, I was thinking about what's that one moment that's super special to me throughout the entire course. And I've had 30 brilliant guests, so I couldn't pick one. But I remember there's this band called Alif. I don't know if you've heard of Alif. Alif also played at Weekender and all these big stages. Um, Alif essentially talks about Kashmiri music, right? And he talks about his stories through his music. And I managed to get them to come down from Pune for a conversation. And they played an unreleased track, then unreleased track, onto the podcast exclusively, right? One island hustle huge label who's I'm not T series, right? That you say something on my podcast and suddenly some big manager picks you up. What they believed was in the power of an honest conversation. And I think in podcasting, that's the most important thing. Having honest conversations. Okay. I'm going to play you the song that they played exclusively on my podcast. Just give me a second. I'm switching up my internet and I'm going to play that for you. My screen. I think you can, right? You can see my screen?
Yes, ma'am, we can.
Okay, great. So this is Alif. This was a conversation with Alif. And this is how it goes. बेवजह कब तक रखे जिंदा मुझे राज मेरे मैं बयां कैसे करूं वो मेरी बात जो है राज हकीकत में तेरे पार खड़ा क्या मुझे हक है नहीं कोई गम खार मेरा यार बने खार मैं उस वार खड़ा बेईमान रूठा है शिकवा झूठा है खून पिए सियाह बने दिल कौन है वो जिंदा शायर बेवजह कब तक रखे जिंदा मुझे हमराज मेरे मैं बयां कैसे करूं मेरा मजमून जो मातम से भरी रात है मैं बेजार खड़ा क्या कोई समझा नहीं मेरा वो शेर सियाही में छुपा मैं हूँ जहाँ खार खड़ा हो इजाज़त में आज कैद तुम
समझ ख्वाब हूँ आईना क्यों आवारा था अफसोस.
I'm just going to take a second to recalibrate my thoughts. Okay, that was beautiful. Is this like, do you want to talk about the song or should I just like jump right back into my set of questions?
इस पीस का unwan है कौन है वो जिंदा शायर. The crux is like whosoever that zinda shair is, doesn't he have the right to have someone who comforts his heart, who just listens? That's the emotion. For example, it's like बेवजह कब तक रखे जिंदा मुझे राज मेरे, तो मेरे राज बेवजह मुझे कब तक जिंदा रखेंगे. ठीक है, मैं बयां कैसे करूं वो मेरी बात जो है राज हकीकत में तेरे पार खड़ा हूं. अभी how do I tell you the secret of my heart when I am outside my body, physical body, and right opposite myself? How do I tell the secret of me to me?
Yeah.
क्या मुझे हक है नहीं कोई गमखार मेरा यार बने. गमखार means someone who's जैसे therapist होते हैं.
Correct.
ठीक है, कोई गमखार मेरा यार बने खार में उस वार खड़ा हूं. बेईमान झूठा है शिकवा रूठा है खून पिए रात सियाह बने दिल. Khun is like a night that drinks every energy of you like a blood, like aisa. कि उसी पे वो जिंदा है. सियाह बने दिल, सियाह means black. कौन है वो जिंदा शायर? And then my favorite line is मैं बयां कैसे करूं मेरा मजमून जो मातम से भरी रात है मैं बेजार खड़ा हूं. मजमून means essay. And how do I even tell you a night which is like an essay of grief, grieving? How do I tell you how that night felt? The end is like हो इजाजत में कैद तुम. अमूमन ऐसे देखा जाता है कि कैद इंसान कमरे में होता है जहां पे बाहर जाने की इजाजत नहीं होती है. लेकिन यहाँ पे ये emotion, I don't know why, I have no hand in that, why it came. It just came that हो इजाजत में कैद तुम. It's like you are free to do, you have the permission to be and do anything.
Yeah.
It's like if somebody puts you at the entrance of a desert and tell you go whatever direction you want.
Yeah.
Like, damn, you'll be, confused which direction to choose. It's like you can do anything, you can go any direction. And that वो emotion है हो इजाजत में कैद तुम बेवकूफ ना समझ ख्वाब हूं आईना क्यों आवारा था अफसोस. So that
Ijazat mein kaid is a very relevant. So this moment when I look back at this conversation is when I realized something. This is what I've been wanting to do with the podcast, with my life, with everything. Sometimes you have those moments and you look back at your life and you're just like, did that just happen? And that brings me to the most important part of our conversation, right? Why create a podcast? What is your podcast supposed to do, right? The first thing that you will do when you're trying to understand how to create a podcast or why you should create a podcast is lock in on your why, right? I've had great conversations, but why am I having those great conversations, right? It's very easy to listen to something and just lose yourself. But even while you lose yourself, what is that anchor that holds you and this conversation, right? Your why could be anything. Your why could be the purpose of why you're doing the show. Your idea. I came in with an idea that, okay, listen, not a lot of people are doing this, and I want to do this, right? What's that thought? The thought that's charging these conversations. The gap that you see, right? So, for example, if you want to start a science fiction podcast, then you just go to Spotify, you go to Apple Podcasts, you go to Google Podcasts, and then you see a list of science fiction podcasts, and you see, okay, there's a lot from the US, there's a lot from the independent space, but then you look at it and you're just like, wait a minute, where are the Indians in the conversation, right? And you're like, you know what, I want to look at space from the Indian perspective, look at India's history, and then decide how I want to describe space, right? That is a gap. That might also be your interest, right? Trust me, your gap and your interest there don't necessarily need to be the same thing. Okay. Sometimes it could also be a disinterest. For example, if you do not like what, say, television is showing today, say you do not like anything from the Ekta Kapoor cinematic universe. Okay. We all know what the Ekta Kapoor cinematic universe is. If that is the case, then your disinterest would be a stepping stone into the conversation, right? You can be like, you know what, let's talk about this show. What is it that you don't like? For example, say you don't like how the protagonist is treated throughout the show. That is your jump off point to the conversation. Or it could just be curiosity, right? You know what, I was very bad at math in school, so I want to figure out how does math really work, right? So in this conversation, I call educated math experts to come and teach me simple maths. It's actually a brilliant podcast idea. I would listen to the hell out of it. Simple thing is that, say for example, you call Pooja ma'am, right? And you ask her a question about commerce. And then she tells you, how do you approach this question? How do you answer this question? When you do that, you take ma'am's expertise and you add your curiosity to it. And that creates a great conversation, right? There are so many conversations around you at any point in time. The simplest thing is you want to start a conversation for kicks. Okay. You want to start a podcast, and that's a valid reason, mind you. You want to start a podcast, you don't know what you want to do, but you want to start a podcast. So we figure out from that point, you take a step up. You look at all the questions that I've listed above and recycle your thoughts to come up and fix a why, right? How does this why help you? This why helps you achieve something that's called the golden triad of content creation, right? Creating content that impacts people and leaves a value, right? Um, Fairly simple formula. There are three pillars to this formula. There's content, there's context, there's audience, right? What is content? Whatever you create. What is context? Context in which you create this content. And what is audience? Who do you create this content for, right? For example, if you have an audience and if you have a context, right? Say I have an audience that loves watching the Big Bang Theory, but also does not like the sexism in Big Bang Theory. So I automatically have an audience and I have a context in which I'm building the show, right? So what would the content be? Talking about sexism in science fiction, right? It could be a show where, say, queer folks, women, we could also then have a conversation, even men for that matter, how usually the nerd stereotype is shown, right? You know that nerd is a proper character trope in literature or in media in general, right? For example, if you're somebody who's interested in money, right, or finances, you have an audience who does not know anything about finance, and you know that you have a lot of things to say about finance. So that is context plus audience, right? Content plus audience. How do you build the context for the person? Very simple. Does anybody here follow Finance with Sharan on Instagram? No one? You might have seen his reels here or there, right? So, right. So Tushar is saying yes. So what does Finance with Sharan do? Break it down into reels. Simple 15 seconds, 30 seconds, maximum 1 minute conversation around finance, right? For example, you feel your audience is college audience and you have a lot to say about finance. Can you talk about how can we start saving early on in life? All of these conversations are valid. Podcasts are genre agnostic. They don't have to be about one specific thing. You don't have to be like, oh, let me sit back and think what is popular. Personal interviews are popular. Talking to celebrities is popular, so let me do it. No. What is going to start happening is if you don't have a plan, if you don't have all three of these locked in, you're going to get stuck at every step in the process, right? It's easy to find the first 10 guests. Why? You will sit down, you will make a list of 10 guests, and you will start sending me invitations. What happens after the 11th guest is now these 10 guests, you're recording conversations. You forget inviting the 11th one, and the 12th one, and the 13th one. And suddenly, you are at the 10th conversation, and you're like, oh, I don't have anybody. to interview next, right? That is a problem. To avoid spot jogging, you will always make sure that these three things are locked in. Okay. Any questions up until this point? No, we're all good? Okay. So I hope so far so good. We've all, I'm just also keeping time on the other side. So that's okay. So now let's break it down. Let's break scripting down. How would you script a conversation? First thing, you understood your content, your audience, and your context. Now you have to ask yourself, is this a fiction show or is this a non-fiction show, right? What does it mean to have a fiction show? Something like, say, Serial, Bhaskar Bose, Indian Noir, Nilesh Mishra ki kahaniyan. A lot of these shows which are based on creating stories, poetry, anything that is fictional in nature, right? Something that you have to create or write from scratch, right? The other is non-fiction. Non-fiction is interviews, journalistic pieces, reportage, documentary, conversations with people. All of these are non-fiction, right? Genre and tonality. What genre is your conversation in, right? So, for example, if your genre is finance, how is it? Is it personal finance? Is it something like community based? Is it something that's based for a certain audience? What is your genre of your story, right? What is your tonality? Is it going to be super serious? Are you going to talk like in a very professional voice, explaining what does it mean to save money, right? Or are you going to be like, hey guys, what's up? Good morning. Let me tell you how to save money, right? What are you going to choose from this? Are you going to be like, boss, you know what? I had this much pocket money, and I did not know what to do. So I was thinking, if I have 100 rupees and if I eat a Shezwan rice worth 60 rupees in the canteen, what can I do with the 40 rupees? Right? Now, this is also a tonality. You can see whatever categories I'm giving you are not absolute categories. You can have a fictional, non-fiction show, for example, what I just said, right? You want to tell X message from your podcast and you make a story around it, right? Which is part true, part fiction. That's also possible. But these are just broad ideas I'm giving you. They all overlap with each other at all points. Okay? There's tonality. How do you want to talk to your audience? There's audio and video, right? So are you going to do an audio podcast where you're just using your voice? Nobody can see, right? Are you doing a video podcast like I am talking to you right now? Say we record this and we post it. I will tell you the difference and the primal difference between the two. That's a game changer, right? First, audio. You can't see my face, right? Let me just, um, okay. If I say, oh my God, why would you say that? Do you think I'm happy or do you think I'm sad? Just give me a quick response in the chat. I'll repeat myself. I'm saying, oh my God, why did you say that? Am I happy or am I sad? Can you make any, can you gauge my emotion at the moment? Happy? It's hard to say. Happy? Okay, sad? Sad? It means I have not done a good job conveying my emotion to you. You should know the moment you listen to me, what am I saying, right? For example, if I'm saying it this way, oh my God, why would you say that, right? Does it sound like I'm annoyed? Right? Or if I say, oh no, I mean, why would you say something like that, right? But at the same time, when I'm switching on my camera and you can see me, right? You can tell exactly what I'm trying to say, right? Um, oh my God, why would you say that, right? I can say that and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. The biggest difference here that is very, very important to realize is a very simple fact, yet again, that you have to use words in different mediums that make sense for those mediums. Oh my God is a very emotion agnostic term. You can say oh my God when you're sad. You can say oh my God when you're happy. You can say it anytime, right? But if I'm clearly dejected, if my face is sad, right, I can react any way I want. Simply, if there's a silence, right, and I'm just like, or if I do any gesture, if I'm just like this, then you know that I've said something wrong. That's possible to pick on video. It's not possible to pick on audio. You have to remember on audio, the only way that your audience can understand you is by voice. Either you work on your voice modulation. Now, I'm not very great at voice modulation, right? I can't, I have a certain pitch limitation. If I speak above that pitch, I'm going to sound very shrill. I don't think I can go below a certain pitch as well. It'll sound comical. What do I do then? I use the power of words. Instead of saying, oh my God, can I say, oh no? When I say, oh no, you realize it's something that I'm disapproving of, right? Or if I say, oh yeah, that sounds great, right? It's something I'm approving of. So you have to be very careful about scripting. What medium are you picking? How are you going to execute that conversation, right? I think we have like 10 minutes. Yeah, please tell me if I'm over time or something, okay? The next thing is your podcast host centric or guest centric? It can be both or it can be neither, okay? Is your podcast being driven by, say, one host, two hosts, three hosts in a conversation, right? Or does your podcast depend on who is the guest for the week? Who is spearheading this conversation? When you start, it is always going to be guest centric if you're in an interview podcast module. Okay. If you're doing an interview podcast like Litnama is or like a lot of other shows are, I don't know how many of you here follow Varun Dugirala, but he does two shows. One is Advertising is Dead, which is an interview centric show where he gets guests from the media industry every week to have a conversation. The other show that he does is called the Varun Duggi Show. On the Varun Duggi Show, he only talks about his mindset. What does he think? What does he feel? Right? That show is about him. So that's a host-centered show. And the other is a guest-centered show. Right? I believe there was a question in the chat that just asked me. Dhatri had asked me, can we make a podcast with no guests? Absolutely. Right? You can always make a podcast that's just say you and your friend talking or just you giving advice, right? That's a possibility. That's very well a possibility. But usually when you're doing host only shows, always ask your friends and keep a check on your content because it's easy to lose focus and lose track. Okay. So there's either host centric or a guest centric show. Are you going to have guests? How many guests do you have at a time? These are all limits that you can design for yourself. I can't design them for you. You have to pick your own permutation, combination of things that are on your screen right now. Is it going to be a structured conversation or an unstructured conversation? What does that mean? Structured is when you have a fixed set of questions. Okay? And unstructured is basically when you don't have a fixed set of questions. Your questions can be sort of, how do I put it? There shouldn't be a list of questions in that case. It can just be like you and I sitting together talking to each other, right? There can be a few points that you put down, like I did, right? So these slides that you can see are some points that I've jotted down that I feel I should talk to you about. But the conversation is unstructured. I'm telling you what's coming on my mind right now. I'm picking up your questions. I'm talking to you. Unstructured also works beautifully if your conversation is a flow, right? It's just a flow of thoughts. But if you feel that there's a chance that you will lose yourself, you will not be able to circle everything back, then you should go for a structured podcast, which is like list of questions, answer the question format. Okay. Or even structure sometimes mean that you have an introduction, you have a body, and you have a conclusion, right? You could also have a lot of other things that I will tell you in just a minute. Another thing that you need to decide when you're looking at types of scripts is it short form? Is it long form? Is the conversation 20 minutes? Is the conversation 1 hour, 20 minutes? Is the conversation 3 hours? There are podcasts which go on for 6 hours. Okay, that's very normal. You should listen to the seen and the unseen. Absolutely normal. 6 hours, 3 hours, must chill conversations. people listen to them and they're top grossing podcasts. I'm not saying that the numbers, this entire thing that people keep telling you that attention is a problem, that, Gen Z does not have any attention span, Gen Z does not like long content. No. Your mediums and your algorithms are telling you that you don't have um, time to listen to long conversations. If you're interested, you can, right? And if the conversation is interesting, you will. So you are at your freedom to decide if you want to do short form or long form. Okay. Then comes, is it a conversation, right? It doesn't always have to be a conversation. It can just be facts. It can just be a reading. Say, for example, you're a poet and you want to experiment with the audio medium. You read your poetry online. There's a very, very successful poetry podcast called Poems You Can Calm Down To by Megha Rao. It's published by Commune. It's a brilliant podcast where she reads her poetry and she's a brilliant, brilliant voice. She has a brilliant voice. So it's very soothing to listen to. Okay. So that's a possibility. Another thing, the next thing that I widely use in my show is readings and performances. If I'm calling artists, then am I asking them to read something from their recent book? Am I asking them to say, perform a piece, right? Most of the times, the authors on my show are like authors from Penguin India, HarperCollins, Westland, and they generally come in when they have a book due, right? So I ask them, can you just read a few pages from your book so that we can understand some favorite paragraphs, some lines that you enjoy, right? That's also a possibility. And then at the end, there's games or challenges, right? All of you consume Abhish Matthews content, so you know this better than I do. That there are fun games that you can play with your guests at the end of the conversation, in the middle of the conversation, to adjust your flow accordingly. If you see, all these 6 things I've told you tie up with each other. In fact, 9. All these 9 things I've told you tie up with each other. So the first thing that you will do when you're sitting down to write a script is start with a blank canvas and lock in on these points. What do I really want to do with the show? What is my purpose? Who is my audience? What is the context in which I'm making this show? What is the kind of content I want to do? Under content, is it structured? Is it not structured? Is it fiction? Is it not fiction? Is it a conversation? Is it a reading? Do I have sections where I play games with my guests? Do I have them perform in my show? All of these are decisions you can take while you're scripting a podcast. Okay. Here are some more important things, right? I will start with a random order. Okay. The first thing is equipment. A lot of people will tell you, oh, you need to get like heavy duty equipment, mics worth 4,000, 5,000, 10,000 to start a podcast. No. You need a quiet room and a laptop. That's it. A laptop which has a good mic. By good mic, I mean a functional mic. If you have a silent room, it does the job. Okay, you don't have to worry about. I don't have the most recent Rode mic in the market. It's not. It's fine. It's okay. It's absolutely okay. Nobody's going to hold that against you, right? When the lockdown just started, I did like a good 10 episodes of my show online, and I've used like an HP laptop. I didn't even have a Mac back then, so I used an HP laptop and the HP Notebook series. You know, the most older one. I think I've had that laptop for good 4 years. Not 4 years, actually 5 years throughout my college. I used that laptop, and it was literally like in shambles by the time I got to recording on it. And I had given up, right? Another thing you can use is a good pair of wired earphones, right? Trusted earphones. Earphones have a good mic. They might help you record better, right? These are things that you will figure out. You should have crisp discussions. Don't beat around the bush too much, right? Make it clear, make it simple. Keep it conversational. I've told you that if you don't have a conversation, your audience will not know what you're talking about, right? Always remember your audience is not in the room. Your audience even not does not know you. They don't know who Lakshmi Krishnan is. They don't know how Lakshmi Krishnan looks like unless they follow me on social media, right? Always talk to your audience as if they don't know who you are, right? Bring them in, welcome them into your conversation. It's like podcasting is like going to a party, okay? You tune in on different tables, right? If you go to a party, you're like on some tables they're having a particular conversation. Say somewhere they're talking about cryptocurrency, somewhere they're talking about spirituality, somewhere they're talking about Illuminati, somewhere they're talking about low carb diets. Where do you want to go, right? And once you go there, and for example, you're hosting this table now. Let's flip the script here. If you're hosting a table on crypto, how are you going to make your audience feel welcome? Are you going to say, hey, long time, how are you? In today's episode, we are going to talk about 5 things about crypto that you require to know. Are you going to do that? Right? Are you going to establish context? If you're new to crypto, you can listen to the previous 3 episodes to get more context on where did crypto start and how is crypto here today. Always remember to include your audience and be honest to them. Don't fake it. Don't fake and be like, oh my God, that one time I met Shah Rukh Khan and it was amazing. Good for you. But your audience is tuning in to listen to you, right? If you're doing a guest-based show, every week there's going to be a new guest on the side. But they're here to listen to you, and that's the most important thing. I believe am I out of time? No, I think I'm good. Yeah. So be yourself, okay? That's the most important thing. Let nobody else tell you that you're not cool enough for a podcast. I've been said that quite a few times before I started the podcast. Oh, I don't think a podcast is the right thing for you. Cut to when the podcast was out, they're like, oh, you started a podcast. It's so cool. Acha, can we meet this author that you spoke to? Can we meet Ritviz? Can we meet Ritasha? Can we meet Radhika Vas? Makes no sense, right? People are going to say all kinds of things to you. If you are confident in your idea, and confidence is one thing I didn't have when I started out. If you have faith and if you're doing your research, don't say random things on a podcast, okay? Like, don't be like, I am from the Flat Earthers Society, unless you're doing satire, then that's super cool. Do your research, curate your content, right? Research is going to give you more long-lasting content than anything else. Keep your flow open, right? Be open to what comes into the conversation. Be respectful of your guest, even if they might not, be the kind of ideal guest that you expected for a conversation, but they are your guest, right? And now that they're in your house, and now that you're on your podcast, you are going to welcome them and you are going to talk to them, right? While all of these are important, a good distribution strategy is equally important. So when you're writing a podcast, when you're writing a script for a podcast, always remember who are you writing for and where is this content going to go? Is it a YouTube-based podcast? If it is a YouTube-based podcast, I'll tell you some simple things, right? I just told you about um, attention spans and all of these things. If you're doing an audio podcast, then how do you listen to music? You play a song, it's playing in the background, you go on to do your work, right? Similarly, if you go on YouTube and if you don't have YouTube Premium, it plays in the background. But if you're listening to YouTube on your phone, you know that if your YouTube is on, you can't do anything else on the phone, right? Always remember what you put out on a visual medium has to be appealing or has to be short, right? But audio is your game, you can experiment as much as you want. Another thing that people often tell us is that there's only one format for a podcast, right? There's only one way in which podcasts are written. Not necessarily. The only way in which podcasts can be written is this way where you are able to manage this, right? You can have a podcast which, say, for example, there are 4 days in the 4 release schedules in a week, right? In 1 week, you release 4 episodes. Your 3 episodes can be long conversations and 1 can be short one. Or you can have 3 short episodes and 1 can be a long conversation. You can decide what you want to do with your content, right? As long as it's getting responses, right? Podcasting is not something that will make you go viral in 1 day. It's an investment. It's a lot of effort. It's a lot of time, right? But when you build on it consistently, see what podcasting has done for me is that it has given me a network that I absolutely cherish, right? And that network has taken me places. Podcasting might not pay off money in your pockets, but podcasting will help you put your foot down when you enter rooms. It'll give you the confidence, like for someone like me who, say, in 2019 was skeptical about if podcast is even a thing, to today giving a talk about how do you script podcasts, right? We think scripting means sitting down and writing the whole thing. Not necessarily. You can, right? There's nothing wrong in it. For example, if you want to give 3 hacks to study better, then you will have to do your research and write those 3 hacks down. I have done that. Trust me, I'm also a freelance writer, so I know I've written scripts for people and their podcasts. So like this one script I had written about creativity, right? What is creativity? Where does creativity come from? What are some things that you can do to channel your creativity? Would I be the one ever doing that podcast? No, that's not my thing. Your podcast, whatever's your idea, is something that you should be comfortable in. And that will make for a good podcast, not like, say, following what Ranveer Alabad is doing or what Joe Rogan is doing or what some other big person in the podcasting industry is doing. They've been around for a while. They've experimented a lot. And now that they've made it, you feel like this was their day one. No. The day they made it was probably their day 100. Day one was making a lot of mistakes. Day one was sitting here and wondering, how do I make this podcast happen? Who will listen to me? Now I'll tell you who will listen to you. The most simplest thing you can do is ask your community, right? Think of an idea, discuss it with friends. For example, since we're talking about HR Speaks, and HR Speaks has literary ventures, right? There's a beautiful podcast that they did, which I genuinely love the topic for, was turning around the mic and asking the teachers what would they feel teaching through the pandemic, right? Learning through the pandemic, everybody spoke about. But what was it like to teach through the pandemic? And that's interesting, right? That's something that's not done. They had their purpose, they had their questions, and they sort of cross-checked their idea and took it ahead, right? Ask a friend, hey, listen, I feel I know a lot about XYZ thing, and I'm thinking of starting a podcast. What do you think about my idea? One thing that I will recommend all of you to do if you're somebody who wants to start a podcast, the simple thing you can do is start a Word document and note down your ideas, right? Create a flow for 10 episodes. If you're doing it with a guest, if you're doing it alone, that doesn't matter. Create a flow for 10 full episodes. Episode 1, I will call this person, this is what we will talk about. Episode 2, this is what I will do. Make that entire list, right? And the last and the most important thing I want to tell you, if you want to gauge if your idea is something that will work, can you explain your idea in one whole minute, in 60 seconds? If you can, then I think you've done half your job. It's easy to tell your audience. I'll also play you my first 60 seconds of Litnama. I think you'll be able to hear it through my mic. Yeah, this was my introduction that came out in December 2019. Let me know if you can't hear it. IVM. Once upon a time in a galaxy far, far away, we heard stories of talking animals with wavering moral compasses, princes and princesses, and things that always ended into a happily ever after. But in this digital era, everything is the story, the narrative, and the next big thing waiting to be explored. In this content-driven rat race, do we forget to revel in the beauty of the world of words? From Beowulf to Bob Dylan, and from Shakespeare to Shakira, literature has the potential to encompass them all. But what is the story of literature, or the story of a story itself? Does it thrive only between a prologue and an epilogue, or does it outlive us all? Welcome to a podcast where we move beyond once upon a times and happily ever afters, try to rediscover the joy of storytelling through mediums we cannot ever imagine. I'm your host Lakshmi Krishnan, and this is Litnama. Tune in for a new story every Tuesday, 10th of December onwards, on the IVM Podcast's website, app, and wherever you access your podcast from. When this went live, I thought nobody would listen. And Spotify does a yearly roundup where you find out which podcasts, like what have you been listening to, what are your top artists, your top music, and top everything. 7 people, mind you, 7, sent me a screenshot of me being their top podcast of that year, of 2020, I think, a year after we were launched. And I couldn't believe it, right? Even if 7 people listened to me so much that I was one of their top podcasts, is magical. There are so many, of course, that I didn't get to speak to. These 7 happened to have access to my social media and could reach out to me. You never know where would your 7 come from. And if you stay at it, consistency is key, mind you. That's not something I've put here because this was limited to scripting and I only had an hour. But consistency is key. Your 7 will soon become 70. Your 70 will soon become 7,000. Your 7,000 could soon become 7 lakh. And you never know, you might overtake Ranveer Alabadia really, really soon. But until then, this was my conversation on podcasting. And if you have any questions, please ask me. You can use chat, unmute, anything that you're comfortable with. Do I think Clubhouse is affecting podcasts? Very interesting question. Thank you for bringing Clubhouse into the conversation. So Danielle is asking, am I pronouncing your name right? Please correct me if I'm not. So Danielle is asking that, do I think if Clubhouse is affecting podcasts? Yes and no, and yes in a good way. Okay. No, because Clubhouse requires you to be actively present, right? Clubhouse requires you to be there in the moment and speak, right? It also asks you to have a lot on your mind, know what the conversation is about, right? If you're joining a room, then you know that you have to speak something that's relevant. Podcasting gives you a little more space. You can think about it over time. You're not put on the spot. You can take your time. A good thing is a lot of people are experimenting on Clubhouse. And if they really like what they're doing and they find an idea, then they're moving towards podcasting, where they are recording this and releasing this and packaging this better. I think Clubhouse is a great experiment. If you want to see and gauge your idea, you can try speaking on some relevant Clubhouse rooms. So if you're talking about, say, beauty and makeup, you can try and speak in some beauty and makeup related rooms and see how your content is working. That could really actually help you. Every medium is great. You just have to use it to your advantage. I hope that answers your question. Karina was asking, is it necessary to plan content for all episodes before launching the podcast? No. But what is necessary is to create a bank. What is a bank? It's a backup of a few episodes that are ready. So every time you're launching a show, you should at least have 3 to 4 episodes in the bank ready, so that in case something goes wrong. So for example, um, you're unwell, you're unable to visit the studio and record something, or you're unwell and you're unable to sit in front of your computer and record something, these two to three conversations that are in your bank will act as fillers and will keep the conversation going, right? It's not necessary to plan all the content, but I think it's better if you plan at least the first 10 episodes so that you get an idea of where your show is going. Where do you want to take it, right? I think that really helps. Prem is asking, how do I approach guests for the podcast, for my podcast, with utmost honesty? I tell them, hi, I'm Lakshmi. This is who I am. This is what I do. For the first set of guests, I looked into my own network. I have spent like 6-7 years in the arts and culture space in Mumbai. So I first looked at my own circles and my own mentors, people I really liked talking to, and I was like, I'm Lakshmi. I'm on the IVM network now. I have a show and I would love to speak to you. Uh, is it something that is possible? A lot of people have also said no. Okay, not everybody says yes, right? One of the rejections that actually hurt me a lot was from Bhadipa, right? I had approached Paula, right? Yeah, Paula from Bhadipa. And she said that I don't think I'm a good fit for the show that you're doing. She's not wrong, right? She said, I don't do this kind of content that you're talking about, and I don't think I'm a good fit. You should also know where to let go of a conversation. Of course, I could have written to her and be like, please, 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 but that doesn't help anybody, right? So I'm like, okay, Paula, no problem. Maybe I'll approach you after a year, and if then our interests match, then we can definitely speak, right? One of my closest, now I can call her friend, but one of my closest people, one of my mentors, I had approached her for a conversation. I wanted her to be the first episode. But sadly, she had a contract with BBC where she was doing a podcast that was sponsored by BBC, and she couldn't be on my podcast. So I said, okay, no problem. It's okay. We'll figure it out. I think with podcasting and with guests, right, you have to always have a figure it out approach. You have to always be scouting for good guests and looking at who you can talk to. One thing that helps in the proposal that you send to a guest is talking about what of their work interests you, right? I mean, tomorrow you'll write to Tanmay Bhatt and be like, hello, Tanmay Bhatt, can you please be on my podcast? You are OP, thank you. Keep your phone down. Is that going to work? No. He gets 50,000 such messages. What is going to work? Hi, Tanmay, I really like your second channel where you talk about XYZ things. This particular episode I watched and it really helped me. I used this advice that you gave and this is how it's gotten better. You give them proof that you know their work, and you're inviting them not because of their star value, because you feel like they're great people to talk to, right? You involve and indulge in their content and then ask them to indulge in yours, right? That makes for a really good proposal. So I think that answers your question, Prem. Thank you for that one. Yukti is asking if you want to learn how to podcast, are there any courses or internships or other resources that might help? Trying and trying and trying. That's the best thing that will help you. You can follow, there are a lot of resources online, of course. There's Pod School that you can follow online. Pod School does a lot of these workshops. So they have a newsletter that comes into your DMs and comes into your email and basically gives you some advice. One more advice that I have about figuring out if you need to do a course, you should rather follow people who are heads in your space, right? For example, if you're doing a finance podcast, who are the top 5 finance podcast gurus internationally? Who are the top 5 finance podcast gurus in India? Use that, right? Talk to them. Don't talk to them per se, but look at their content. Follow them on LinkedIn, Instagram, follow their social accounts. If they have a newsletter, follow their newsletter. Take advice as much as you can because they'll obviously talk about their content, right? Take as much advice as possible and use that and incorporate that through your show. I think that will help you better than a course. Um, I haven't spoken to you about distribution a lot today as to how do you package and distribute your show, right? There are a lot of podcasting sort of agencies today that can help you with it. But it's fairly simple. Now, if you are looking to create a podcast, then you can go and download Anchor. Anchor is an app by Spotify that allows you to record your own podcast, edit it on the go, and upload it. But it will only be a Spotify exclusive, right? You can also use SoundCloud when you're starting out. And when your podcast picks some traction, say you cross a certain milestone number of listens, then you can write to Geo7, podcast at Geo7 or podcast at Ghana and all these other places and ask them if they'd be interested in distributing your podcast as well. That is how you can work. You can start with YouTube, SoundCloud, Anchor, and Spotify, which is free. Spotify gives you great discoverability, gives you great album art options. Definitely check it out. For recording, you can record on Zoom, right? Zoom gives you 2 outputs, video and audio. Clean up your audio a little, add an introduction and an outro, right? Always mention your social media handles at the end. Package it, start posting it, right? This is also something you can do. Tushar is asking how to structure a free-flowing unscripted podcast. For example, we have the Slow Interview by Nilesh Mishra, brilliant show, or Joe Rogan or Dostcast by Vinamra Kasana, another brilliant podcaster. The conversation there is free-flowing, but of course there will be a structure behind it. Unstructured does not mean with no thoughts, right? Like this presentation that I made, while it did not have a fixed structure to it, like I was talking to you on the go, I did not have a lecture written down that I was reading out from, but I had thoughts, right? For example, if you're getting Nilesh Mishra as your guest, right? What are going to be the 10 questions that you want to ask Nilesh Mishra? What are some things that you're interested in exploring? So, for example, slow interview as a concept. You want to know more about slow interviews. You want to know more about Nilesh Mishra's career. You can write down, jot down pointers, and you can discuss pointers with them before you start recording and feel comfortable. And then start the free flowing conversation. Every conversation has a bottom line structure to it, right? But free flowing here means that you don't restrict them. Like, okay, next question, next question, next question. No. You ask a question, you take it into the conversation, and you're like, oh, so while we're at it, what do you think about that? Right? That is a free flow. Structure is like, okay, Nilesh, so my next question to you is this. He answers, okay, and what about this other question that I had? That's a structure. Okay. Naman is asking, I would love to be your first guest, Naman. Thank you so much for asking. Can a podcast be used for promotional purposes? Absolutely, yes. You just have to know where to do your brand plugin and how to do your brand plugins. Okay. Do you want to make it a sponsored show? For example, a lot of products use shows to sell their own products. Like Bumble did a very interesting podcast recently on relationships, where they spoke to some influential women and their idea on romance. Tinder did a very interesting conversation during Pride Month, where they spoke to queer people and spoke to them about podcasting. Okay. Is there any particular, Candice is asking me, is there any particular equipment that is needed to host a podcast to make it sound more efficient and structured? 2 things. If you're going to a network, if you're approaching a network to do your podcast, then they will provide you with like a sound setup, a studio, and you can record there. If you're going the individual way, I would recommend one, you can record on Zoom. Other, there's a website called Zencaster, Zencastr, Zencaster. You can use Zencaster to record your conversation. It's very professional. It's a proper podcast setup. Okay. The other thing you can do is while you're recording on Zoom, you can switch on the voice memo or voice recording on your device natively, right? Say we are having a conversation, you switched on a voice recorder, it records a more high quality voice, right? Ideally, when I started podcasting, while I depended on IVM to record, when I was in the pandemic doing it by myself, what I did was quiet room, lights, fans off, okay, absolutely quiet room, doors, windows, everything shut, okay. Figured out a time in my day when it's more quiet outside, there are no vehicle noises on the street or something like that. It's calmer, okay. Figured out a corner in my room where it's the quietest, okay. A lot of podcasters I know put a blanket on top to create a more soundproofing setup. You can create a pillow fort and more than happily record in a pillow fort, right? I worked with a basic HP laptop and a Boat earphones, a pair of Boat earphones. Okay. With earphones, my problem was I gesture a lot when I talk, or I move a lot when I talk. So the earphones are way worse, right? So the audio quality might get glitched. So then I started recording using my laptop. What a lot of people, if you're investing in equipment, what a lot of people recommend is a pop filter. Okay, pop filter matlab the pa and the pa and the da and the bha sounds don't sound harsh. The sound tonality sounds smooth, which is the filter that's in front of the mics, right? My hack for a pop filter was using the I don't know what's it called in Hindi, the strainer that you use, right? While you pour tea. I used to use that strainer as a pop filter. Then from freelancing and from saving up money, I got myself a Mac. On a Mac, it's slightly easier, right? But if you're normally recording on an HP, you can, or a Windows-based laptop, there are a lot of these equalizer-related apps on your laptop as well. So anybody who has basic idea of video editing would be able to help you with cleaning the voice a little bit. Of course, they can't change everything for you, but they can definitely be of a good help, and you should keep them handy. So yeah, I think, are there any more questions? I think I answered the last one just now. You can do that. Okay, Tushar is also saying that there's a levelator that you can use, and you can do that. Okay, so while there might not be any questions right now, if you have anything else that you want to ask, you can reach out to me on either of these places. Instagram and LinkedIn are the best places to contact. Of course, you can send me an email as well, which you will get from my Instagram directly. But yeah, DMs are the best place to reach out. Ask me any questions if you have any. I would love to solve if there are any more doubts, if you want to network with somebody, if you want to learn how to pitch, because see, 1 hour is still quite a short amount of time. And I think I've already taken a little more than an hour, quite more than an hour. So that's pretty much it from my side. And I hope, first of all, I would like to thank HR Speaks again, because this has been such a phenomenal conversation to have with all of you. And you've been just such great sports, and your questions were phenomenal. And secondly, thank you, Pooja ma'am, and thank Shweta ma'am again. It's always great to come back to HR, and it's always great to have these conversations. Karina, thank you so much for all the coordination, all the timely back and forth that we've been doing, and for keeping me in the loop at all times, not making me chase you, but you were the one chasing me. And I think it was not as much a chase, it was a great conversation. And I wish you all good luck for the talks to come. And thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lakshmi, for a wonderful session. I mean, it was like, I could see the chat box students had so many questions. They were so inquisitive about it, but you covered it so wonderfully and answered their questions. So thank you so much for your time, efforts, and we look forward for more such sessions from your end.
Always here for all of you. Thank you so much. I hope I managed to cover quite a decent amount. It's a whole universe of things you can learn. But yeah.
Can we move for a vote of thanks? Yeah.
On behalf of HSNC University, HR College, and HRP, I, Premsita, would like to thank Ms. Lakshmi Krishnan for taking the time to share her valuable knowledge with us. Your ideas have encouraged us and will undoubtedly guide us in our future endeavors. Thank you to all participants as well, whose cooperation and involvement throughout made this a great experience for all of us. Thank you, everyone. We would also like to let you know that HR Speak is hosting a writers community. So if anyone is interested, the Google link form for the same has been provided in the chat box. Have a nice day. Thank you, ma'am.